Hey, what's up, y'all? What it do? How are you? How's life? How goes it? Y'all, can we just take a second, please? Can we just take like a second? Can we just take a breather? Because that was a lot. If y'all haven't already watched part 2, please go back and check it out. We will wait. But yeah, please go back and check it out, and just so you can follow along with the greatness of God. Now, once you have done that and you've checked out part 2, come on back so you can take in part 3. Now, without any further ado, let's get into this testimony. So, college. What a dime and a half that was. So I actually had a friend, a guy friend. His name was Best Friend. Well, his actual name wasn't Best Friend, but for some reason, Best Friend was a nickname that we both decided at some point in time during our relationship to refer to one another as. And yeah, that just stuck. So yeah, Best Friend was his name. But looking back, I wouldn't say that we were actually best friends, but we were definitely close, which makes this story that much more tragic. Now, I really didn't have a lot of friends in college, you know. I had people who I would associate with in school, talk to at a party on the weekends, but outside of that, I really just had like a small clique that I associated with, and over time he just became a part of that. Our relationship was casual but fun. We never really had, you know, any kind of deep connection as far as friendships go. Our friendship mainly consisted of jokes, cartoons, and beer. You know, after class, I'd always go over to his residence building and hang out with him and his roommates and his friends. And, you know, we would just do and say the stupidest things to make each other laugh. And he would watch Adventure Times, and I would ask him why he's watching Adventure Times. And at some point throughout the night, we would all just end up playing a drinking game. And that was pretty much the sum of our friendship. Speaking of friends, I feel like I should also make mention that I was actually dating his friend at the time. That's actually how he and I met, was through my ex-boyfriend. You know, he would go over to Best Friend's place and hang out with him and his roommates, and then over time, Best Friend and I became close. Now, as an extra layer of context, I will say that at the time, I was fully committed to my ex-boyfriend, and the relationship that I had with Best Friend, in my eyes, was strictly a friendship. That's on me. I definitely should have seen the signs, especially because there was a time where my ex and I had found photos of me on Best Friend's phone, probably from one of my social media accounts, and, you know, normal? I think not. I used to ask myself all the time, you know, why was I friends with him? He didn't fit in my typical friend category, you know. He was the type of guy in school, you know, the one that, you know, they weren't popular by any means, you know. They would dress a little corny sometimes, a little corny. And, you know, they didn't have a mean bone in their body. They were just nice to everyone all the time. And you know, at a party, they could appreciate a good buzz, but they would like never drink and drive. Yeah, that kind of friend. After a while, I realized that I was friends with him because he felt safe. Whenever I was around him, I would have this subconscious thought or feeling that he was too nice to be mean, that he was too basic to ever be a problem. So I would let my guard down around him. And one night, he took advantage of that. Quick disclaimer. This is not about to be a video where we bash or put down anybody for a wrong that they did, no matter how bad that wrong may have been. Because we all fall short of the glory of God, and we're all in need of His grace and mercy. Now, what I do want to share, however, is what took place between he and I, and how God used that to show me that the only way that I was ever meant to feel safe, the only way that I'm protected and I'll be able to experience the true beauty of my life going in the way that it ought to go, in the way that I desire it to go, is by allowing God to be God. So one night I was home alone, and I hated being home alone, y'all. I did not like it, especially in college when I was living out in Timbuktu all by myself. Like, I ended up getting a pet hamster just to keep me company, y'all. His name was Rocky. He was so cute. I named him Rocky, like the movie, because y'all, he was so strong. Like, when he was in his cage, he would like literally be doing pull-ups on his cage. I used to also make him these obstacle courses like in my room so that he could like learn them and go through them, and I would cheer him on, and he was just such a good friend. Don't judge me, y'all. Okay. Anywho, because of this, I always felt the need to be out and about with friends, partying, or just doing something fun. And looking back, I could really see that it stemmed from my issues with identity, and not knowing who I was in God. And this ended up translating into me trying to find purpose and security and companionship in all the wrong places. So little old me decided to call up my best friend and see what him and his roommates were up to, see what they were doing, and if they wanted to hang out. I also was planning on going with my ex at the time, but he couldn't make it, and I was still in need of something to do, so I went. So we ended up drinking, partying, having a good time as usual, and it got really late. It got so late, in fact, that I ended up missing the last bus to get me home back to my apartment. And I didn't have a car or anything. No one had a car, so they ended up saying, you know, it's cool, I can just crash there, leave in the morning. Mind you, I am wasted. Not here. Okay, gone. Okay, I am jumping off couches. I am swinging from the chandelier. Yeah, that's where I was. So I agreed, because, you know, what else am I gonna do? And then best friend offered to allow me to sleep in his room, you know, just on the floor. And, you know, he got some sleeping bags, some pillows, whatever. Make it as comfy as it could be for a drunk person like me. And that was that. And I just remember for like maybe about a half an hour or so, us just talking, having drunk conversation, laughing, until I fell asleep. Now, let me remind you that he was not a drinker, okay? At least not in the way like some of us were in college. I remember this one time he got really drunk and he never wanted to get that drunk again. So he wasn't a drinker. And that night he had like maybe 1-2 beers max. So by the end of the night, he was fairly sober. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to him lifting me up off of the ground and placing me onto his bed. Now, my initial thought was, wow, that's so nice of him to allow me to sleep on the bed, a girl, instead of the floor, like a gentleman. At most, I thought, if he, for whatever reason, does like me in that way or see me in that way, then maybe he'll just want to lay next to me. Maybe this won't be as bad as I am anticipating. I just tried to come up with every excuse that I could in those 15 seconds of him lifting me up and placing me on the bed to try and convince myself that what was about to happen wasn't actually about to happen. I remember people would taunt him and tease him all the time, his friends specifically, because he was still a virgin at the time. And I just remember feeling so bad when I would see that or hear that and thinking to myself, I hope he just finds a girlfriend here at the college so they can just stop bullying him. Because I could see it. I could sense it on his face every time it would happen, that it was something that bothered him. And I felt bad. I was still really drunk and passed out in his eyes. But it didn't take long for me to realize what was happening. And I immediately went from curiosity of what was taking place to petrifying fear of what was actually happening. I pretended that I was unconscious the entire time. Because I figured that, maybe he would see that I am completely wasted, completely KO'd, and think that I wouldn't feel anything or know what was happening. And that obviously worked because he didn't stop. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of people who see this and immediately think to themselves, why didn't you just say no? Why didn't you just say stop? Like in every movie ever where the girl is going down the dark, eerie, creepy corridor where the killer is, and you were screaming at the screen saying, don't go that way, you're gonna die. And she's like, I'm going that way because I have to die. Yeah. I know people are gonna think that. Why didn't you say no? Why didn't you fight your way out of his grip and run screaming for help? Why didn't you just say stop? I watched this episode from this series a while back, and I truly believe that God used that to help me, or seen in that episode to help me get the answer to this question that I asked myself after it happened. Why I didn't say stop. He used it to help me get an answer to that question. There was this girl who went to a party and was hanging out at the party with this good guy friend of hers. And they were drinking, they were having fun, they were off some separate place from everybody else. just talking. And at some point, he came onto her and held her down and started raping her. And she, terrified of what was happening, just ever so quietly a couple times said, "Stop, please stop." And obviously he didn't listen, and he kept going. It was in that moment that she felt powerless. She felt like there was nothing she could do. And if she tried anything, that it would only get worse. She felt like the easiest way out was through. And that's why I never said stop. That's why I let it happen. I remember one of the more subconscious reasons that I felt safe around him was because he was a fairly small guy, fairly skinny guy. When you look at him, you're not thinking buff or strong. And that just made me think, or in my eyes, see him as someone who wasn't a threat. But that night, he used all the strength that he had. I remember him trying to quietly and slowly undress me by pushing and pulling my body in different ways and trying to get things off. And I just remember trying to think of something to do. I remember groaning and trying to use that to scare him into thinking, oh, she might wake up. She might catch me, so I should probably stop. But he didn't. Y'all, I was also on my period at the time. And I don't know if that's TMI. Might very well be. But, to be honest, this entire series is TMI, if you really look at it. And, throughout filming the series, I've really been trying to remind myself that vulnerability doesn't hide. Vulnerability lets people in on the secret things, on the hidden things, that in turn has the power to help them see just how deep trauma can run, but moreover, how far the hand of God will go to pull you out of that every time. So I remember him pulling my tampon out, and I remember him flipping me in different positions so that he could try them out, I guess. And I remember him flipping me on my back, flipping me on my stomach. He lifted me literally and propped me on my hands and knees. And I was still unconscious. And I remember just trying to do anything I could to get him to stop without physically saying that. So I tried to make my body go limp. When someone's unconscious, their body's limp. And I was hoping that, he would see that and again, think to himself, the girl's unconscious, I should probably stop. But he didn't. He just lifted me up, held me upright with all his strength, and kept going. Demeaning would be an understatement of what I felt in that moment. I felt like I was nothing. I felt like I was just a piece of human that deserved to be in that position and that could be tossed around by anyone or anything. I felt shame and guilt. Like I put myself in that position and deserved to be there. Like it was all my fault. I remember lying there, crying on the inside, and literally crying through my eyelids, but keeping them closed. I remember the tears going down my cheek and just praying in my head, oh God, I hope he doesn't see me crying. I hope he doesn't see me crying. I hope he doesn't know that I'm awake right now and I can feel what's happening. But the biggest thing that I remember feeling was alone. Like I was alone in this deep, dark pit that was his bedroom, being tortured with no one to call on. And I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to open my eyes. Because in my mind, if I opened my eyes, if I looked him in his eyes as it was happening, then he would know that I knew what he did. And the thought of him knowing that I knew what was happening was even more terrifying to me than just letting it happen. It terrified me even more because then I could no longer live this facade that everything was okay and that I felt safe. I could no longer walk around with a smile on my face, acting like life wasn't hurting me, because now someone else knew that that wasn't true. And I didn't want to give him that power over me. I thought that by avoiding the things that were hurting me and by putting a smile on my face, I could protect myself from being broken by it. When in actuality, all I was doing was slowly allowing myself to be broken from the inside out. I would slowly allow these things to chip away at my identity, which ended up manifesting through me acting a certain way around people or in certain environments that was contrary to who God said I was. Honestly, all I can think today is, but God. Like literally, like, but God. A symptom of this, I think, ended up becoming me acting as a people pleaser. Because in my mind, if I could give everyone else what they wanted or needed, then they won't have time to see what's going on with me. I also started to become a little bit of a control freak, you know? I just always needed things to be set a certain way and have control over it. And, you know, both of those things, the people pleasing and controlling my environments, just ended up making me actually believe that as long as everything else around me, as long as my environment is okay, then I'll be okay in here. The thing that God ended up telling me after years of being tormented by this experience was, I never expected you to protect yourself. That's my job. I never expected you to make everything in your life perfect and go right. Again, that's my job. Your job is to let me in. Your job is to not avoid those things that have hurt you. It's to allow me to mend those things that were broken. Your job is to get out of the way and let me do my job. So stop trying to play God in your life and just let me be God. He said a lot of times playing God doesn't look like what people think playing God looks like. It doesn't look like someone trying to control the world, even though that is out there. A lot of times, playing God is someone trying to control their world. And he said, that way of thinking leads to pride. And pride goes before a fall. He said, I'm supposed to be that one person that you can go to with anything that's hurting you, anything that you need help with, and I'll make it all right. That's not on you. It wasn't on me. He said, you don't need to save yourself from this world, because I already did that. After hearing that, I was finally able to forgive him for what he did in my spirit. And God even brought me to a place where I felt sorry for him. I felt so sorry for him because he felt the need in that moment to degrade himself in order to appease something that God never called him to harbor either. And God also showed me that I had taken on a yoke that I was never meant to be attached to in the first place. I was walking around every day anxious and weary and worried that if I didn't keep up this facade, I'd break. But he reminded me that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And that if I rest in him, then I'll never have to feel unsafe again. And that if I rest in him, I'll never feel powerless again. Now I'm at a place where I just give those deep, dark spaces to him. And I really do hope that you do the same thing. Stop playing God over your life. And just allow God to be God. See you in part 4 of The Story of Us.